Hi, my name is Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to share with you my March wrap-up. There are 11 favorite books of March that I read, and I read 30 books. So I mean, this might be a longer video, I think. So grab yourself a snack. As I said, I read 30 books in March. Of the 30 books, it basically was that like 20% of these featured characters of color and 10 of them were characters that were queer. So roughly worked out to be 66% versus 33%. And since my target goals, as always, are 50% and 33%, I feel really good about that. I'm not mad about it. I read so many fantastic books in March. There are, I said already, I think 11. So I read basically 3 kind of YA contemporary romance-ish / romance books. And then I read 3 YA books that were not really romance. There's a variety of different ones. And then I read, let's see, why is this in a different section? Anyway, I read 2 romance books and then 2 fantasy books. So let's just get into it because it is a lot and I have a tendency to speak forever. So, She Gets a Girl. This was so swoony. The characters in this were so fantastic. With dual perspective, sometimes you're like, oh, I like one character more than the other. I loved Molly and Alex both so much. I loved how Molly was going through all of these struggles with her own identity and with also this idea of like, we can build an image of a person in our mind so clearly and then it's like, that's not who that person is. And then with Alex trying to feel like she needs to prove herself, but also she needs to prove to herself. And it's like a two-way street, trust. So lots of thoughts about that. But anyway, She Gets a Girl was just so swoony. The romance was super fabulous. But I think my favorite aspect were the characters of Molly and Alex kind of separately as well. The next one is The One True Me and You. This was just such a cute YA queer romance. It had pageant stuff. It also had Comic-Con / convention stuff. It was just this perfect melding of all of these things I really like. Specifically as someone who watched a lot of the, what is it? I was gonna say Miss Confidential, but that's not, Miss Congeniality. That's what it was. That was like on a lot in my house. So this brought me back, basically. And also the characters in these were so fantastic. I was gonna say fantabulous. The characters in The One True Me and You were just so detailed and nuanced. And like what I loved the most about The One True Me and You is that I feel like in a lot of romance books in general, you can have these situations where it's like, oh my god, there's this giant conflict that's between us that we can't figure out because, you know, we're being, you know, pulled apart by forces out of our control and whatever. And I love those books. But I also loved how in The One True Me and You, it's also about like these perceptions that we have about ourselves and these perceptions we have about other people and how that can get in the way of our love, our budding love. So that's why I love The One True Me and You. I'm trying to like, you know, speed these things up because my videos tend to be going on forever. The next YA like romance book that I really loved, or YA contemporary with like lots of romance in it, was Kiss and Tell. It is about a main character. I don't know if this is dual perspective. I can't remember. I don't think it was. No, it's not. I don't think it is. Ugh. Anyway, Kiss and Tell is about a main character. He is an openly gay boy band member, and I think what I loved about Kiss and Tell was how fallible Hunter is, the main character. Hunter makes a lot of mistakes. Hunter is dealing with a lot of stuff as well, though. He's dealing with the pressure of being openly gay. He's dealing with the public perception of being like a celebrity in general, which the more and more I think about being a celebrity and the more and more I think about like the pressures that are on celebrities, the more and more I'm kind of like, well, I'm fine not being a celebrity. So it's a lot about that, but it's also a lot about like having to not shoulder all of our burdens alone and having to open up to people, having to acknowledge our own privilege as well. But also, yeah, as I was saying, how we are not alone. And it often seems that we are, and it feels that way to us a lot. But if we just take a moment to step back and realize that we're not alone and that there are people who will help us and who will advocate for us, then things are a lot better. I think that this was such like a universally relatable conflict because, you know, even I on days feel like I'm shouldering all of these burdens alone. And this is not a therapy video, this is a wrap-up video, so gonna keep it moving. The next one that I loved, so basically those were my like YA contemporary romance-ish books, and the next one which I don't even know if this would be considered a YA contemporary romance, which is why I didn't put it in the first category, is Heartbreak Symphony. I loved Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet by the same author as Heartbreak Symphony. I don't remember anyone's names, honestly. This is why I can only remember some of the characters' names that I'm telling you. I'm sorry. It's not because I love those books more or I love those authors more. It's literally because 30 books in a month with 31 days, that's a lot, right? So, I'm sorry. Anyway, Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet was so, oh my god. I remember listening to this audiobook while I was doing my dishes and just like crying. Just tears while I was doing the dishes. So I knew that Heartbreak Symphony was going to be on the top of my anticipated list because like, that's some emotional destruction right there. So Heartbreak Symphony was just that again. It's a book set actually in the same world as Somewhere Between Bitter and Sweet, not with the same characters, but the same world, and also further in time. So we won't see any of the same characters, but like that's the same world. And what I loved about it was that for these two characters, Mia and Aaron, they're going through these very, very hard family trauma, grief, loss, pain, resentment, anger, the whole, all of that. And so it's like, it's them, but it's also them having to deal with their relationship to music, because that's how they meet. They meet at like a music school audition thing. And it's about them also having to deal with their own kind of feelings regarding their family and regarding their music and regarding their future. And also kind of like the first one, but I think even more so in this one, there's a lot of discussion about themes of immigration and deportation and ICE and just like all of these different things, which also make it like heartrending as well. So Heartbreak Symphony, all the thumbs up, honestly, for that one. Like, if you love YA contemporaries that deal a lot of emotional, like, destruction, there you go. And actually, now that we're on that page, speaking of emotional destruction, An Arrow to the Moon. So basically, An Arrow to the Moon was one of my most anticipated reads of basically all of 2022. I love The Astonishing Color of After. It's one of those books that has so many great memories attached to it. So An Arrow to the Moon is Emily X.R. Penn's latest and upcoming release, and it is so good. It is a Romeo and Juliet meets Chinese mythology retelling set in a contemporary world. So it's set in our world. It's not set in like a different world, for example. An Arrow to the Moon, I think for me, the first half was really wrapped up in the mystery, and I loved the mystery and the suspense. And then the second half, the mystery kind of just goes poof. It just takes off. And also the fantasy elements in the second half really bloom. I felt like the fantasy in the beginning was kind of nebulous. You're not really sure what's happening. And like very intriguing. And then in the second half, you're like, oh my god, I now understand. And also the emotional destruction of basically the ending and the back. And it was like, this gave me everything that I wanted it to. And so I'm like, emotionally kind of sad, but also like, well, that's what I wanted, so yeah. Anyway, let's see, I'm going totally out of order. The next book that I also really loved was The Chandler Legacies. What I think I appreciated the most about The Chandler Legacies is basically this book about a writing circle, an elite writing circle at like a boarding school. And in The Chandler Legacies, not only do they have to become better friends with each other, but they really have to push each other and also push themselves. And I think what I really loved about The Chandler Legacies was the friendship element. It was really beautiful to see all of these characters open up and these characters like make friends and to have really hard conversations with themselves and also with each other as a group. So basically, The Chandler Legacies is just a really, really emotional book about friendship, but also dismantling a lot of toxic systems and corruption at the school, and just like a lot of really intense subjects as well, dealing with hazing and homophobia, for example. So check out the trigger warnings, but I really, really loved this book. And it was also a book where like I kept reading it and then not wanting to put it down. The next one is This Rebel Heart. I read a lot of most anticipated books, honestly, in March because a lot of them come out in April. This Rebel Heart is a historical fiction. It's by Catherine Locke, who is one of my favorite historical fiction authors, like seriously unparalleled. And so This Rebel Heart takes place post-World War II in Hungary, revolving around a revolution. And what I loved about This Rebel Heart was how emotionally like heartbroken I was. I think the theme maybe of March are all reads that kind of broke my heart. But this Rebel Heart had passages and lyrics and like writing mastery touches that were just like so perfect and so like beautifully, whimsically, impactfully, poignantly written. It's kind of difficult to explain without telling you what they are, and I'm not going to because you need to read the book. But anyway, this Rebel Heart, you should obviously know that it is a very emotional book. Because this historical time period is very emotional. There's a lot of anti-Semitism towards Scylla, but there's also a lot of like secret police and a lot of fear about wondering if you're going to be disappeared. That's what they call it in the book. So it's really emotionally intense throughout, basically, from beginning to end. But it is so worth it because it is such a beautiful story about value in a rebellion, value in a hope, the value of possibility. And it is just told in such a beautifully lyrical way. So I have to recommend it. And now let's just go on to the 2 adult fantasies that I read. The first one is The Cartographers. I read this one early in March, so I'm kind of like just like, what is this book even about? Basically, it is this book about this girl, and she has this falling out with her dad because he's a cartographer and so is she, and they find this map, and she's like, oh, I want to know more about this map. And then he's like, put the map away. And then she's kind of like, no, I found that map. I want to know what it's about. And then he's like, no, get out of here. Get out of the New York Public Library cartography section. Your career is done. Basically, though, he dies, and so when she's going through his stuff again, she finds the map, and then she's kind of like, well, you told me this map was trash. Why do you have this map? And then all these secrets about her family, her history, like maps in general kind of come out. If you really love maps, you have to read it because I really, really love maps. So I was like, must read this book. And it was so fabulous because the suspense and the mystery, like, it kept me reading. It's compulsively readable. I think that I didn't really understand the term compulsively readable until I read The Cartographers, because I was like finishing a chapter and I'd be like, oh my god, this new secret was revealed. I have to read about it. And also the fantasy element in it was like, love it so much. And it was kind of like one of those books where I kept coming back to it. I kept thinking about it. I kept being like, well, what do I do? I kept wondering how it's going to end until I finally just finished it. And I was like, this emotional anguish must end. Basically, I loved it so much. It's, I'm pretty sure it's standalone, so it's definitely a book that I would really recommend. Also, I would recommend it to people who are like, I don't know about fantasy, because this one definitely has more of like a, if I had to describe it, what would I say? I would say it's like 80% contemporary, because I mean, it's not historical fiction, it's set in our time period, and then I think like 20% fantasy. So the fantasy elements are not super, super pronounced, but they are there and they are fantastic. The next one is The Blood Trials, which also was compulsively readable. Like, I started reading it and I was in love. I was in love with Ikenna. Ikenna is like a fabulous main character. She's driven by revenge, trying to figure out why her grandfather died / was murdered. And so to do that, she has to go into these blood trials, which she wasn't going to go into before. But basically, where she has to do a lot of really awful, terrible, horrifying things, basically, to survive and to become part of this fighting elite soldier group. But what I loved about The Blood Trials is Ikenna is such a fabulous main character. She is just, I was rooting for her from the very beginning. And also I think what I really loved as well was how action-packed this book is. Like, if you love magical competitions, so like, or those fight to the death kind of competitions, it's not like a battle royale, really. It's more complicated than that, okay? But if you love both of those aspects, if you love politics and like war / house politics, I would say that this is a fantasy, but I would also say that there's some elements of science fiction, like with biochip stuff, basically. And also I felt like the structure of the soldiers and that felt kind of a little bit Roman to me. So it has all these elements that I really loved, kind of all smushed together and then kind of put in a book. And I loved The Blood Trial so much. I need the second book, and so I'll just be sitting here waiting for the second book. And then the two romance books that I read were just so beautiful. The first one was A Brush with Love, which I had seen hyped up all over Instagram. Mostly I think because DJ from Life and Fiction really loves A Brush with Love, and so I'd seen it a lot and I was kind of like, well, why not? And it was so good. I stayed up till 2 in the morning to finish it. I didn't read it in one sitting, but I basically was like, I'm gonna read, what's a good amount of chapters a day? I'm gonna read 4 chapters a day. And then basically 3 days before finishing it, so I had maybe, 15 chapters? I was kind of like, let me just read a little bit. And then after the 4 chapters, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read a little bit more, all right? And then I stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing this book. So I think what I loved the most, though, about this book is that the romance was just like, yes, swoony, angsty, slow burn, tension, friends to lovers, all of those different things. But what I loved the most was Dan and Harper's characters. So they are the main characters. It's also dual perspective. And I loved how fleshed out and detailed and developed and complex these characters were. Like how Harper is trying to figure out her relationship to success, her relationship to like other people and how much she lets them in, her own anxiety, all of these different things. And Dan is also trying to unravel this very complex family drama mess, basically. It's a mess. And how he fits into this and how it impacts how he feels. And so what I loved about A Brush with Love is that it is deeply devoted into examining and exploring these characters as characters. And yes, there's the romance, and it's obviously a huge factor because it is a romance, but it was like so wonderfully dedicated to exploring their issues and their complexities and their vulnerabilities and fears to the fullest capacity. And finally, I read The Romantic Agenda and I loved it. It is the first romance book I've ever read with an ace main character. There's also a very important ace side character in this. And it was just like so fabulous. Basically, Joy is in love with her best friend Malcolm. They've been friends forever. He's like the first ace person she's ever met. And she's like, oh my god, I might be ace. And so they obviously have a very important, essential relationship. And she loves him, but they're not together, okay? And so basically then he invites her on a couple's weekend with his new girlfriend and his girlfriend's ex. So, you know, because that's not going to be dramatic. And The Romantic Agenda is really about Joy, and so much of it is about Joy kind of unraveling her feelings about Malcolm. Also with unraveling her feelings, how she feels about herself, and how worthy she feels, how deserving she feels, how she thinks about herself and her future and her choices and her possibilities in love and also possibilities in life, really. And so what I really loved about The Romantic Agenda is how dedicated it was to exploring Joy's character and not being just like, oh, new character, ooh, intriguing, how do I feel about that? Like, that very much was, you know, it is a romance, and part of it very much was about her opening up to another person and trying to figure out, oh, you know, it's different to meet new people, and how do I feel meeting a new person, and how does that change how I feel about me? Because the person that she was when she met Malcolm, or even the person that her and Malcolm have gotten, you know, tangled up into, is not necessarily all there is to Joy. I thought that was such an important message, because we can get really stuck in these habits and these like relationships, you know, these things where it's like, oh, you know, 5 years ago, I forgot, you know, I had a limit, but you pushed past it, and I just like, I didn't say anything, but now it's been 5 years, right? And so I thought that The Romantic Agenda was so important for having these discussions, and I just like love the heck of it. That is my March wrap up. Hopefully I did this a lot quicker than I normally do. I know that these favorites videos also have been getting very long, so, you know, I'm trying to keep it going. But anyway, I hope you have a really great reading month. Let me know down below what some of your favorite books are, and also what your favorite kind of queer romance books are. I would love to read like all of them, basically. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!